Good day. Today's video, lesson 3.2, is on adding rational numbers. And we know adding rational numbers, the rules are the same as adding integers, so adding just a whole negative or positive number. Now we have one vocabulary term to review, which is sum, which is the answer to an addition problem. And I notice a typo here. It should be AN for Ann. And as I said, so we're adding rational numbers. We apply the same rules that we use when we add integers. Our first example is just adding rational numbers with the same sign. So for instance, a negative plus a negative or a positive plus a positive. Our problem is, Kyle pours out 3/4 liter of liquid from a beaker. Then he pours out another 1/2 liter of the same liquid. What is the overall change in the amount of liquid in the beaker? So our first step is to just take the story problem and write it out as a mathematical expression. So we have 3/4, but because he's pouring it out, it's leaving the beaker, so that really represents a negative. 3/4. My bad, that should be a 4. Negative 3/4 plus negative 1/2. But we notice that we're adding fractions. So when I look at this problem, really, I'm going to write this as two fractions with a common denominator. And I know that 1/2 is the same as 2/4. So my rewritten problem is negative 3/4 plus negative 2/4. So I've got a negative plus a negative, which I know results in a negative. And then with adding fractions, I just add the numerators, so 3 and 2 is 5. Oops, and I noticed that I wrote 2/5 instead of 2/4 over here. My bad. So negative 5/4, which is also known as negative 1 and 1/4. So the sum here is negative 1 and 1/4. That is how much the beaker of liquid has decreased. It has lost 1 and 1/4 liters. Our second example is adding rational numbers with different signs. So again, just like with the same sign, the same rules apply. So to add rational numbers with different signs, we find the difference of their absolute value. And then we use the sign of the rational number with the greater absolute value. So if the negative has the greater absolute value, meaning it's farther away from 0 on a number line, then the negative would be the sign of your sum. Or vice versa, if the positive has the greater absolute value, then we would have a positive sum. Our example here, or our problem here, during the day, the temperature increases 4.5 degrees. At night, the temperature decreases by 7.5 degrees. What is the overall change in temperature? So increasing 4.5 degrees, well, that increase, that term right there tells me that this is a positive. So 4.5. And then the fact that it decreases, that tells me that I'm going to add a negative. So now, going back up here, we know that we find the difference of their absolute values. And difference refers to subtraction. So the absolute values here, the absolute value of 4.5 is 4.5. And the absolute value of negative 7.5 is 7.5. So really, what I need to do here is subtract 7.5 minus 4.5, which is 3. And then I use the sign of the rational number with the greater absolute value. So looking back at my original problem, which number is farther away from 0 on the number line? 4.5 or negative 7.5? In this case, it is a negative, so that tells me that my sum is a negative. So the overall change in temperature is negative 3 degrees. It's supposed to be a degree symbol. Not really working for me, is it? Oops. There we go. Negative 3 degrees. Now what I would like you to do is just briefly pause the video, try this problem, and then unpause it to see how I've solved it. So, 12.5 plus negative 4.8. So again, I've got an addition problem where I've got two different signs. I've got a positive and a negative. So I know the first thing that I need to do is to find the difference of their absolute values. So really, what I'm going to do is take 12.5 minus 4.8 to find the difference. So I need to do a little borrowing here. $8.7, and then again, going back to looking at the original problem, which rational number has the greater absolute value, and in this case, it would be the positive 12.5. So my answer of 8.7, excuse me, this should be a 7.7. Got my error right away. 7.7 is a positive because positive 12.5 is greater in terms of the absolute value than negative 4.8. So positive 7.7 is my answer. Now what I'd like you to do is try the 3 your turn questions on your own. If you have any questions, remember to ask your teacher about it tomorrow.